How's it, everyone? Welcome to this webinar on module building with Intent Architect. So we're very excited to take you through this particular webinar today. I'm going to be showing you guys how to automate the predictable and repetitive patterns in your projects. We're going to be looking at some of the new ways that we've been doing that. So we're going to be looking at things like the builder patterns and so on and so forth. As part of the webinar, the way that we will be structuring it and the way that we will break it down is really into three different sections. Where I want to start is just with a warm-up, really a simple example, a basic example of how to create a module. We can spin up something there that'll actually be semi-practical, but just to give you a feel for how all of this works. And then we'll go and iterate again, and we'll do a more real-world example where we can do something quite practical. And I'll be using some tools to get us through that nice and quickly. And then we'll go into a little bit more of an advanced example where we will start taking advantage of some of the ways that we can even automate the design work that we have to do as part of the Intent ecosystem. So I'm very excited to take you guys through all of this. We've got some really good stuff to cover. A few things that I could just mention before we jump right in. The first is that if you have any questions, of course, the Q&A is available. So our team is in the background. They are waiting for your questions. So just shoot those questions through. What we are considering is if we get some really good questions as part of this, we will create a Q&A sheet that we'll share with everybody who participated as part of the webinar today. So feel free to shoot those. And the one thing I can also mention is that if we have time at the end of all of this, I do have a bit of a surprise for you. So there's some very cool tooling that we're experimenting with at the moment. And if there's time, I'll be very, very keen to take you guys through that. All right, so that's really what we have in mind as part of the session today. Let's get right into it. I'm going to start sharing my desktop. So you guys should be able to see this shortly. Okay, and let's kick this off by launching Intent Architect. And all right, so what we're going to do is, before I get into this, we're going to get into module building now shortly. But one thing I could just mention when it comes to module building is that the approach that we typically take is one where we have, you could say, a three-step process. We will first, the most important thing is to understand your pattern. So you need to know what you want before you can decide to automate it. So we do not recommend building a module on a pattern that you've never at least implemented yourself, at least once. So, and check that it works, because that's the long way around. The fast way to go through things is to first have your pattern understood. Okay, so this is how I want my repositories to work, or I want, a certain service to work, or whatever the case may be. And then the next step in that process is to look at how to automate it and to create a module for it. If your module is based on a design aspect, we will look at how you can describe that. And so we would have this intermediary step before we look at exactly the automation. But typically speaking, the most important thing, at least, is that you do automate, or at least understand what you want to automate before you get into automating it. All right, so let's kick this off by creating a new module. That's what we're going to do as part of the session today. And I'm going to create something here called webinar .modules. And the first very basic module that we can create is an entities module. So let's just call it basic entities module. So this is we'll focus in the C# space, because that's where the vast majority of our users are. So we're just looking at essentially automating some POCOs for example, the domain. So basic entities, and let's just call it exactly that. So basic entities, we can say next. And we can go and basically set this up to focus on the C# space. Of course, we could bring it in Java and do the same thing if we wanted to. And we're going to include the domain over here, because we know that we want to project out certain patterns for every domain object that we describe as part of our domain modeling. All right, so let's go ahead and create that. And it's just going to go ahead and download the modules that are required for this. So that should get set up very nice and quickly. And we can kick this off pretty much as soon as that is done. So we'll just give that a second. And that should be all of it. All right, perfect. Okay, so we're going to create some entities here, but it also helps. This is not necessarily how we would typically do it from the Intent Architect team's perspective. We usually set up different tests in a different solution. But for the webinar today, I'm going to go ahead and just create a test for us right here in this solution. And we'll start off with a very, very basic C# Visual Studio solution for us to start playing with. And we'll just create something here called test application. And we can go ahead and say next. And this is, you can see a very, very basic application that we can create over here. Go ahead and open it up. and we can create a project. Let's just call it test application. And the one thing that we can also do here, which I'll talk about a little bit later, is we can add a role which we'll call default, okay? And I'm going to cover these roles a little bit later just so that that's understood, but this is just for testing purposes. The default role is, as the name suggests, it's the default. So this would be the location that all modules will install to initially. As I said, I'm going to unpack this a little bit later on, so we don't need to get too deep into it now. And then we can get into the module building designer here for the basic entities. And so with a typical entity paradigm, you may have a base entity, which is your base type, and it may have an ID on it, for example, and things like that. And then you would have your individual entities themselves. So we can go and set that up quite easily because we know what we'd like here. It's pretty straightforward. I'm pretty sure you guys all have built some kind of an entities domain at some point. So we can go ahead and we can create a new C# template. Let me actually just redo that there so it's clear. So we're going to go over here and say new C# template, and we're going to create something called an entity base. This will be a single file. This is just one file that we'll need in our system. And then we can go ahead and we can create a second one called, let's just call it the entity, which is for the entity itself. And this will be a file per model, right? And what that means is that we're going to create a file for every time we see a certain model type. So we need to first target a certain designer. So we installed the domain earlier. So we're going to select the domain, and we're going to create a new file for every class that we specify within that domain. And we're going to say save at this point, execute the software factory, and it's going to go set all of this up for us. So we're going to get into these, but I can just do a quick sneak peek into what's going on here. So for the actual template itself, this is pretty much it for the entity base. So you can see here we've got a C# file builder. We're going to be getting into this. We're going to add a class called entity base, and we're just putting in an example constructor over here with a parameter just to showcase how that would work. And the same thing here for the entity itself. But this one here you can see is a little bit different because we've got this concept of a model. So the name of the class is a model.name. All right, so we're going to go ahead and apply this. And what it's going to do is this final step is actually, if we look into it, it's a .NET build. And so it's completed, which means that our module's actually been created now, which means that we can actually install it already. So we can go to the modules for this test application. I'm going to go to my local source over here, and you can see there, well, let's just refresh that. We've got a new module here called webinar.modules.basic entities, and that's over there, and it's being created today. So if we install this now, you can see that, well, it's got a dependency on the domain now because that's what we put it in the beginning. So that's just going to download the domain for us. Of course, it's bringing in the Roslyn systems again. There we go. And so you see we've got a domain designer now. So we can come in here and we can start actually modeling out a very basic domain for ourselves. So let's just go ahead and do that. We'll create a very typical order domain, order line maybe, and the product. And we can just go and lay this all out for ourselves. And let's just put a few things in place so that we can see what we're doing as we start to automate all of this. So we're going to want a domain that's got an order date on it, for example. And let's just add here, maybe we want the number of units. It could be an integer, and we want the unit price, which will be a decimal. And on this one here, we can have a name and a description. I'm just going to fix up that typing description. And let's just say we also want over here we want a price maybe. Let me just fix that. Price and a picture URL. Picture URL. Okay, and that could be nullable. All right, just as a quick example over here, just gonna fix this one here, name. All right, this is, if we push save at this point, we can run the software factory for this application. And what you'll see is that very quickly it's gone and actually created as an entity base, an order line, and a product, right? We've got our standard project over here in our SLN file. That's obviously coming in because this is a Visual Studio project and we created a test application. But if we take a look at this, you can see that what it's doing is going ahead and just creating us an entity base exactly with that sample constructor that we created earlier. So we can go take a look at that code shortly and see how that correlates. And then the same thing for the order, and the same thing for the order line. Now, the only thing that was changing here, if you recall from earlier, is that we had the model.name determining the name of the class, but everything was just the same. It was the same constructor with an example parameter just to, get something going there so that we can see something, all right? We can go ahead and apply these changes. And I thought, just for the webinar today, just to make things a little bit more interesting, we can also go and search for a module called RDBMS. There we go. And we can install that. And what that'll allow us to do is if we come back here, we can actually just go and select these and just tell it to manage the keys for itself. See that these are still lowercase. Let's just go and quickly set these settings. We just want to refresh that. There we go, because we've got the domain. And I'm just going to tell it to default to Pascal case for ourselves. And I can just do that step again. Oh, let me just refresh this quickly. And let's just go select all of these. I accidentally just drag copied them. And then now you can see we got IDs for all of these as well. And we can push save. And nothing's going to change because, of course, we need to actually go and wire all of this stuff up. All right, so let's get into actually modeling, or at least setting up this module so that it actually automates what we're seeing in front of us. All right, so we're going to go ahead and open up this location, and we can bring up the SLN file, and we can get started with this. It's just opening up on my other monitor. Okay, so let's just run through this at a very high level. Essentially, we've got our base entity template over here. All right, that's what the basic constructor over there. We're going to go change all of this now shortly. These registrations, just by the way, this is really what determines, it's the factory pattern which registers up each template with the software factory execution. So you'll notice that this one here is a very simple one. It just creates one new entity. It's for a single file. So it just creates the entity template for us over here at the correct output target. And if we took a look at the entity template, it's also just the C# builder, and its registration is actually fetching out all the class models. And this is a abstract template pattern or template method pattern. So we've got the classes coming in, and each time we come across a class, we're going to go and run this method over here, which will go ahead and construct the template. So that's just a little bit of what's happening behind the scenes. Of course, when we told intentarchitect this is a single file or this is a file per model, it goes and just sets that up for us. One thing that is worth just mentioning here is that this is a good place for us to filter if we ever wanted to do some filtering. So I could put a where clause in here, and I can start saying, where the name of this ends with something, and I can do something like that, and it will actually go and filter out the classes that get created as part of this. We're just going to do all the classes as part of this one, but just worth keeping in mind. Okay, so let's get into it. If we want to start changing what this code does here, it's very straightforward. Let's just say we want to, as a quick example, I want to add a property called, or let's just put a basic constructor. So let's just say we've got something like EF in the background. We need a constructor of some sort. Maybe we want this constructor to be protected, but we need it. Okay, so just as a quick example, we can do that. And then we can go set up the actual entity itself. So I'm going to say, well, for each of the model attributes, let me just rename that attribute. We can say that we want on the class. You'll notice that the builder pattern is it's very intuitive. It's exactly what you'd expect when you are building up, if you were to use a builder pattern for, setting up a C# file. So we're adding the class, and then we're drilling in to the builder to say, on this class, I want to add a property. And the name of this property will be, it have a type, firstly, that's what we need to pass in here, which will be the type of the attribute, followed by the attribute's name, which is for the name. And we will just Pascal case this, because we can't always be certain that the developer who is modeling is Pascal casing what needs to be there, but we want to follow a C# convention, so we will do that. And we can do the same thing for our associations. So we can say, go to the association classes. I'll just rename this to association. And if we say build, one thing I want you to notice here is that it's immediately, as soon as this is built, I actually can't see this because of Zoom. Let me just move that out the way. This is flashing over here, because as soon as I say build, it actually reinstalls. I can just show you over here. So it actually reinstalls this this module. So every time we build it from Visual Studio, it picks up that change, reruns the software factory as part of that reinstallation, and it'll start showing us the changes. So we end up with a very real-time experience. So we can see here now that this is shifting across. So we've got our order, we've got the ID, we've got the order date, the order lines, and so on. There's our order lines themselves, the ID. These are the different GUIDs for because we got the RDBMS, maybe we're anticipating here that we want to be working in some kind of like an entity framework or any kind of SQL or a relational database. We can see that those are already getting put in place because of that module. And the entity base itself is really just putting in a protected constructor. So exactly what we told it to do, it's going ahead and creating. We can obviously take this a little bit further, and we can say, well, let's just go ahead and maybe create a constructor for this. We can use the mapping system to get that set up nice and quickly. And we could maybe do the same over here. So I'll map that across, and also, well, we'll maybe just set that, and maybe the product ID as part of that. And this one here, we'll just do the same thing, and we can just set all of these fields. All right, so now if we push save at this point, you'll notice that there are no changes. That's because we haven't implemented constructors. So if we want to implement constructors, we can go ahead and do that. We can say, well, for each constructor, all right, let's call this CTOR model. We want to add a constructor. So you can see it's quite intuitive. We can figure a lot of this stuff out. One thing I could just mention before we move on here is you'll notice that we're using get type name. Now, this is very important actually, because as part of the intentarchitect module building ecosystem, we have dependency resolution systems that just do a lot of the complex dependency resolution in the background for you. So whenever we ask intentarchitect to resolve a type name, it will find out where that type is in your specific application. So your application could be completely unique in terms of its structure and its configuration. And it'll find out what the namespace is of that, and it'll inject the correct using clauses and inject the correct project dependencies and so on and so forth, depending on how things have been set up in your particular environment. So it really saves us. If you've ever seen any kind of, guys trying to use things like T4 and things like that to try and automate patterns, you end up with the first 1,000 lines of that T4 file just being dedicated to all the if then else's for the using clauses. So we don't have that problem. We've got an entire ecosystem that just works the stuff out, and we just use this get type name system, which really just goes into that ecosystem and resolves all of this stuff for us. So that's just something I wanted to mention over there. We can come back in here and we can actually just model up our constructors. So we can go ahead and say we need a parameter for each of these. We'll use the get type name system again for the CTOR model, and we will also hold on, am I looking at, oh no, apologies. We need to do a for each over here for each of the parameters. And let's just put that in there. And we can go ahead and for the parameter. And we want the parameter dot name. And now this time we want to use a camel case for that. And that'll set that up for us for the constructors. So if we save and we say build, we can just hop back into our software factory. It's going to set this up. We can probably, okay, we don't have it open at the moment, but we'll be able to see here that it's going and setting up our constructors for us nice and quickly. You'll notice here that these are IEnumerable. Maybe you prefer to do lists. I can show you. You could do that per get type name. You can actually do it at that level, or you can just set the default for the entire template, and that we can just say set the collection formatter, and we look for C# collection formatters, and we can look for a list. There we go. And we can just build that now, and it'll go and set up. So we'll be able to see now it's switching everything over to list. All right. So that's just nice and quick for us to get all of that. So now everything's just going to follow list across the board. And we can obviously use iList or IEnumerable or iCollection or whatever the case may be. And we can, with the get type name system, we can actually use an overload to specify that very specifically. The last little piece of the puzzle here, if we wanted to finish this template, is just do the operations. And we'll just rename this to operation. And this will be a method, which will have, and yeah, we obviously need to use the get type name to give it a return type, and put that in there, .name, and this will be to Pascal case, of course. So we just always, this is just, you don't, if you forget to put these in here, you will be reliant on the user, whoever is doing the design work inside of your designer, you'll be reliant on them to actually, set the casing and stuff correctly. So we just tend to, whenever we know what the casing is supposed to be, we tend to lock it in right in the template. And of course, if you wanted to control things differently, there are other ways to manage that. But this would be a typical way to just build out a very simple template. And we don't have any operations, but we can go ahead and create one over here, say add line, and we could pass in a parameter, which could be the order line. And we'll pass in the actual order line itself. Order line. There we go. And once we run that, it's going to go ahead and create that for us. All right, so that's real quick, nice and easy. Okay, so that's example number one. That's just the warm up, right? The next example I want to get into is, let's say we want to do something a little bit more. To give you guys an idea, what we've covered right now, this is the building blocks for pretty much building any kind of templating system. So let's use this in a very practical way, a very practical extension that we see teams using Intent Architect. Of course, our team has already built a lot of the different patterns for things like, entity framework and so on, and ASP.NET Core and so on and so forth. But sometimes you need to have very specific integration. So let's use it as an example, a email service. So maybe you want to install an SMTP email service in your applications. You want to be able to upgrade that over time using Intent Architect. How would we go about doing that? So first off, we need to know what the pattern is. Now, as part of this webinar today, what I thought would be quite cool is if we decided to ask ChatGPT to decide to design out our patterns. So this is obviously, we're very close to the AI space. We're looking at this with a lot of interest. We're very excited for what it can bring to the table and how it can help us. It does tend to lead to a lot of craziness. I have, having played with this ChatGPT quite a lot, I have noticed that it does it does tend to have lots of wobbles and do things differently every single time. So you never really know what you're going to get out the other side. But I've got some prompts over here that we can use. So what you can see is I'm asking it to create me a C# SMTP service, the interface, the implementation, and the settings. That can be used in an ASP.NET Core project and so on and so forth. So we can just fire that off and we can let ChatGPT to just go and show us what this pattern could look like. So we'll just use this. I mean, this may be something, and this is something I just really want to emphasize, is don't trust ChatGPT to write the perfect pattern for you. I have seen it do some absolutely terrible things. So just keep that in mind. You do need to check it for yourself, but for the most part, it's really a great way to get a feel for how the pattern should be structured. I've asked it to do things like, create me a repository pattern for a table storage and things like that, and start to compare that to the way that our typical repositories work and what it's doing in that space, because it's got a lot of context. So I find that it really can accelerate the learning that you can get from that. All right, so this is really, you can see here that it's just showing us how we would link this in with our ASP.NET Core. And this is very standard, right? So the transient registration of the email service, just showing us how we can set up our app settings. And that's that. Okay, let's just give it a second to finish over here. All right, so we can see we've got really this SMTP settings, an email service, and the email service implementation itself. All right, so if we want to go ahead and create a module to actually automate this into our applications, all right, we can go ahead, create a new module. And let's just call this webinar.modules. You call it email service, SMTP email service. All right. Just call it SMTP email. And we just need to do this in C#. So we just select that one option over there, and it'll go install this for us, and we can get down to business. So we know that we know what we need. The first thing we're going to need here is we're going to need 3 C# templates. The first is our SMTP settings. That'll be a single file. The second thing that we're going to need here is our email service interface, which will also be a single file. So these will all just be single files because this is just a typical integration pattern. Would be usually a lot of single files because this is quite static in the applications. It'll obviously vary application to application because of the different using clauses and namespaces and things like that. It'll always be slightly different. But this is typically stuff that is usually done unique per project in some shape or form. All right, so let's get into the email service itself, which will be a single file. We can save that, execute the software factory execution, and it's going to go wire all of that up for us. We can go ahead while that's building. We can just go to our modules over here, and we can search local and do refresh, and there's our SMTP email, and we can install that. And of course, it's just going to do the same thing that we saw do earlier. It's just going to create us very simple. So there's the interface, there's our email service, and there is our SMTP settings. All right, so it's all the default stuff. Of course, when we come back to our Visual Studio, it's going to go create us a new project over here that's come in. And we can hop into, let's start with the SMTP settings. Okay, so we know we're going to need to add a couple of properties, which will be a string. So I think it was host. I'll just go take a look at it quickly. So what do we need? We need host. All right, let's just hide this so we can see what we need. All right, so we need host, port, username, password, enable SSL, and from address. So we're going to put here port. I'll fix up the integer, username, password, enable SSL, and from address. All right, so nice and quick over there. This will be an integer. This will be a Boolean. All right, that's the first one done. Okay, so now let's get into the next one. So we want to do maybe the interface first, and that's over here. So this is very straightforward. We just need to return a task. We're going to call this send email async, and we're going to need a string, which is a to, a body, a subject, and a body. So let's just do that, subject and a body. And then on this side, we're going to say that we're going to want to create, well, let's just get back over here and do the email service. And this one here is obviously the more complicated one. So what we're going to first start off doing is we're going to say, well, the first thing we can say is that the class must implement this interface. And we're going to use this interface. We're going to use this extension method. Now, this extension method was automatically generated by the module builder when we created it. And I just want to show you here, because I'm just pushing F12. You can see all it's doing is it's just wrapping up the get type name under the hood. So once again, we're delegating it over to the dependency resolution system to return us the type name, and it'll handle things like, namespace, obviously the using clauses, but also conflicts. So if there are conflicts within the file, it can resolve a lot of those. So it really can do if there's anything strange going on, that'll just take care of that. So that's the first thing we want to do. Next, what we want to do here is we want to go and create this type here. So we'll go and actually put that over there. Now the I options, this is coming from a static location. I did want it to actually include the using clauses. So let me just tell it to do that. Regenerate with the using clauses. Surprised it didn't do that, but as I say, ChatGPT just does what it wants sometimes. And we can go ahead while that's doing that. We can just go ahead and return the settings. So we want to get the SMTP settings name over there. And this is probably going to be our SMTP settings. And what we're going to want to do here is we're not going to want to go and introduce the read-only field, because this is an I options. It'll work slightly differently. We're going to want to basically say here that the CTOR has a statement, which we're going to add in. Let's just give this a second to finish, which is basically the statement over here. Okay, so we're going to just add that statement over there to the constructor. It's really as simple as that. You can obviously break this down into substatements, but this is usually all you need. The only reason you would break this down into substatements is because you want to give someone the possibility to decorate what you've done from another module. And that's usually not necessary unless you know that people want to do that. So we obviously break things down a lot, but that's only because we do anticipate that different developers may want to actually extend some of the patterns. And I'll show you exactly what we mean by extending patterns as we go through this. We're going to need to add a field here. So the field is called, it says SMTP settings. So we'll just go get that. This .smtp settings name, and that's the name of the variable. So that sets up our constructor, and then we can go ahead and add our method over here. All right, so this is going to return us a task. And it's going to be called send mail, and we can just go and actually copy all of these quickly. All right, and that sets all of that up, and then we can just go, and I'm just going to do this the quick way over here, where we just tell it to, well, firstly, this method is asynchronous, so we wanted to add that async keyword. So let's just tell it to do that, and then we can just go and put in a method.add statements. And we can go and add these statements like this. And one of the things here you can see that we could want to do is we could just say convert to statements. Now what it'll do is it'll just do a best effort breakup of this into a set of statements, so that if we ever wanted to, we could find these, but we don't have to do it that way. We can also just paste this string value right in line over here. And that really sets this pattern up. So if we build it now, Software Factory is executing, we're going to get some changes over here. So there's our email service. All right. The one thing that we didn't do is we didn't add the using clauses. So let's just get all of this stuff in. Yeah, so you can see that it's not bringing in any using clauses at this point. So we're just going to go set those up. The way that we do using clauses is, and let's just bring the ChatGPT up at the same time, is we just add that to the file, add using. So we're going to need system.net. Mail. Tasks, and this last one over here. And I think that's it. Yep, that's all that we're going to need. We're going to just build that. You can see it's trying to bring in some but we never add these using clauses that will come in dynamically. We only add, just so you guys are aware, if you're not familiar with the module building system, you will only add using clauses that are static. You never want to have to write any logic over here. If it exists out in your application, you should be able to resolve it through the get type name system. So all of that stuff should just get handled by the dependency management ecosystem. Should really not be something that we should have to worry about. And so there you can see it's really just setting all of this up for us. And if we apply this, we could probably just open up this application quickly. We should just do that from intent side. And let's just go ahead and open this up. There we go. Now, one of the things we'll notice over here, just going to drag it across again, is, of course, it just chucked it all into the default location. So that was just what it's doing by default. That's not very useful. We're going to want to go play around with this later, but this is obviously not going to resolve. These things are, let's just check what the email service is. If there's any, of course, we need to add a using. Let's just do that quickly. So we need this tasks over here. Let's just go to the interface. We're going to want to add that over there. Software factory is executing. Apply that change, hop back in. There we go. So yeah, this is what we can expect over here. Now, I have seen this. This is just joyous ChatGPT stuff. Is it's totally forgotten that it called it host the first time round. So we have to head back over and just go fix up. It's not to the server, it's the host. Do a build over there. Allow that to apply. And now everything should be fine except for this one compilation issue here, because this is designed for ASP.NET Core. So we need to go and install this into an ASP.NET Core application. So this is probably a good point where we can go and create a real application with a full-blown architecture. So let's create a clean architecture test. All right. And we can just leave everything as default. And we can allow that to download. So one of the things that we can see, so I'm just going to leave this downloading in the background over here, and we can just get back to, we need to link this in with ASP.NET Core. So if we come back to our ChatGPT, and I'm just going to shut these down so that we don't have to see them here. And it looks like I closed the wrong thing. Okay, let's hope that it loads for us. So here it's showing us how we can register this up. Okay, so how do we do this? So let's just get our test application up and we can take a look at where the most appropriate place to add that in. So what we want to do now is we want to integrate the service with an existing architecture, like for example, the clean architecture with ASP.NET Core. So let's just go ahead and run this software factory. You can shut down the other ones in the meantime. And we can apply all these changes just so we can see what other noise there could be in the background. One thing that we can also do over here is we could, if we want to, we can just go and grab these three and actually come and paste them across over here. Okay, so we've got a little bit of a domain and we can run that. So now we'll see the standard entities pattern, and you'll see other patterns coming in now, the EF pattern and so on and so forth, that are all respecting this domain. So we just created this domain. There's our order configuration, our product, the repository patterns, and so on and so forth. And we can just go ahead and apply that just so that we don't have any noise when we install our pattern. So let's go ahead and actually go to the managing of modules. Just want to close down everything else over here. And we're going to want to find, let's just go to local, just so I don't have to wait for the server to come back. We can go ahead and install this. Now, one thing I can just mention over here is you'll see that it's giving us some warnings, and that's because it doesn't know where to really put this code, because the role of default doesn't exist in this application. So let me show you what that means, is that if we take a look here, we've got the different output locations. It doesn't know where to put these at this point. So we need to decide where to put these ourselves. Now, there is ways that we can do this automatically, and I'm going to show you that later, because there's no default role in this template or in this application template per se. So we need to decide where we want to put this. So the interface itself, we will probably want to put into, let's say, common interfaces. So I'm just going to drag the interface into the common interfaces. And then this is really infrastructural. Now, we could put this into its own project, or we could just create another folder here called maybe email. And we can just chuck both of these in there. And if we say save at this point, Software Factory is going to execute for us. And we'll see that now it's putting everything in the correct location. So it's putting into the infrastructure project under our, did we put it on a service? No, that's not what I meant to do. Our email, there we go. And it'll put it under the email folder. All right. And it's going to go ahead of here, go ahead and just put the interface into the application layer, which is where we want it. Because of course, remember, our application layer is agnostic to these technologies, okay, as part of the clean architecture dependency rule. So we can see here, and this is looking at some of that, well, not on the settings, but on the actual email server, you can see that it's resolving this for us automatically. So we didn't have to worry about that. And that's just a very simple example of the namespace resolution system and the dependency resolution system fundamentally working in the background to ensure that everything is just going to work out the box for this particular application. So we can go ahead and apply that. And I'm just going to shut this down because we're basically done with this little test. Let's get into our more substantial test over here. And we can open up this project. And what we should see is that everything should be in a compilable state. Okay, but we know if we take a look at the ChatGPT that it's not registered with this application yet. So that's the next step in the equation over here. All right, so let's just take a quick look. We've got inside of our infrastructure layer. Just going to have to give my Visual Studio, of course, it's always going to take a minute or so just to get itself warmed up. And we've got an email folder, and there is our email service. And if we take a look at it, it should be happy. All right, so it seems happy enough. We probably want to turn this into, maybe change the pattern a bit, turn this into a read-only field, and maybe consider not using the using clause like this and so on and so forth. But we're not going to worry about that for now. We can go change that at a later stage if we want to. But let's get into how do we actually, and I'm just going to pin this back, how do we actually integrate this with the clean architecture? So we'd probably want to install this as part of dependency injection, I would say inside of this location of here where we're adding infrastructure. Now, of course, we could go and add it directly into the startup file, but that's a little bit noisy. And you can see that we typically like to delegate things across, there's the add application, the infrastructure itself is where it feels most appropriate, at least from, where I'm sitting right now. So this is where I'm going to put it. We could maybe create a different extension method called add email. And we could add it in over there too. That's an option, but we're just going to stick it in here. So how do we do that? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this actual application's ID. Now we could do it with the application ID or with the with the template's ID. We could do the template ID or we could use the template's role. So I'm just going to use the template's ID. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to create an extension. So coming back to our module builder, we're going to create an extension over here we'll call it dependency injection extension. Right, for our SMTP service. We can save that. And this is just a software factory extension. Now, we've looked at templates. Templates are quite self-explanatory, right? They are there to output, direct files onto the hard drive. When it comes to extensions, you can do anything inside an extension. And so what we're going to use this extension for, and when I say you could do anything, you really can. You could even call external APIs. It's really just a hook point into the lifecycle of the software factory execution. So if we come to our module over here, you'll see that we can take a look at all the different overloads. We can see all the different phases so that we can link in with. So after template execution, after template registration, before committing changes. So these are the different stages of the software factory on start, and we can fire off different things along the software factory pipeline. So I want to create an option here to just, after the templates have been registered, this is usually a good spot. I can just delete that one. That was just an example. I can go ahead and I can get our templates. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say this application, I'm going to find a template instance, which will be this injection. And this is using the file builder, the C# file builder template. So we know that these are, when we're in the C# world, we know that these are templates, file builder templates. And so we can cast it to that. And if we've got the template, so, if the template's not null, you would typically want to check this because this is checking if this dependency injection exists, then install it over here. And so that actually allows you to, basically, if you want, you could have a single module that without having dependencies on other modules can figure out where it should install itself into the application in the most appropriate way. So we could have a whole sequence of different try and attempts to figure out where it should put things. But for now, this is very simple and straightforward. We're just going to want to go in here and install this, play with this template itself. So how we go about this with the file builder system is we go fetch the file builder and we say on build, I would like you to do the following. We're going to say that first off, we're going to want to find that method. So I'm going to just look for that method quickly. So how it's going to work is I'm going to say the file.classes. We're just going to fetch the first class because we know that there's definitely at least one there. And I'm going to look for a method called add infrastructure. Just want to check that I'm not putting in the wrong one here. Yeah, so add infrastructure. That's the method that we want to look for. Just going to paste it there. And this is our method. We can now say, and of course, if we are not sure if that method exists, we could probably do some null checking over here. but we're pretty sure it's going to exist. So I can just go ahead and add the following statements. And I'm just going to add them both right after the, well, technically speaking, you probably want to do this. You say statement number 1, which will be this one. Okay. And we're just going to put that over there. And statement number 2 is this one over here. So it's very straightforward. It's very easy. We're just basically telling it, look, you need to put this code specifically into this infrastructure method. Okay. Add infrastructure method. And you can see that it's using our SMTP service over here. So we would probably want to just actually get it to resolve the namespaces correctly. So, well, let me show you what happens if we don't do that. So if we build this now, Software Factory is executing. It's going to go ahead to our dependency injection. It's going to go put these things in as you would expect. If we apply these changes, I want you to just notice that it doesn't know where these things are. Of course, I could resolve these myself, okay, and we can take things from there. But I would like this to work out the box automatically wherever I install it on anybody's project, at least if they're using this dependency injection module. All right, so how we do that is we just use that simple extension method, but of course we need to call it from the template now, because this is what exists from, because it is resolving the dependencies for this template. And we're going to look for the SMTP settings, and we'll still put that one over there. And this one will be the interface, and this one will be the service. Okay, build. There's our using clause, and everything should be good. The only thing that I did spot there is that it is adding, we've got a local parameter coming in called configuration. So that's lowercase. Can reinstall that, because I think that the example from ChatGPT was really just looking at it from a startup file. All right, so there we go. It is bringing everything in as we would expect. Now, one of the things here, you can see it's not happy about something, and that's because we don't have a certain extension method available to us right now. I could ask ChatGPT for that, but because I've obviously run this example beforehand, I know what NuGet package we need, and I'm just going to go ahead and tell this template to install that NuGet package. So add NuGet dependency, and we're just going to go ahead and just tell it to please install that. Okay, so we need this. This is, you can ask ChatGPT for what is required for a .NET. You can only ask it for .NET 6, just so you know. You can't ask it for .NET 7, but we're in a .NET 7 application. So just go ahead and do that. And so if you install this template now, it's going to go ahead and also make sure that that extension is there and available, and we can apply that, and it should be happy. There we go. It seems happy. All right, so let's just quickly test it out. So that's just a nice quick practical example, but it does help to test these kind of things out if we want to see that it actually works. All right, so let's go ahead and create a command called send email command. And I'm just going to expose that as a endpoint. I'll make that a post, and we'll just call this API/send email. And I'm just going to do this 100% direct, as you can see over here. Run the Software Factory. It's going to set up our controller for us over here. And there is our handler. So let's go ahead and apply that. Head in over here, fetch out this handler. And now we should be able to use our service, email service. We can inject it and bring in the backing field for ourselves. And we can go ahead and await email service, send email to info@intentarchitect.com. The subject is test email, and this is a test email for the webinar. All right. Okay, last little piece of the puzzle over here is we do need to put some SMTP settings into our app settings. So let's just go ahead and grab those SMTP settings. Now I've got, if you guys are familiar with Papercut, I've got Papercut installed. So let me go fetch Papercut, and let's make sure that it's completely clear. Yeah, so it's got no, and we can check the options over here. So typically you'd want to use maybe localhost, so 127. So let's just go set that over there, 127.0.0.1, just to test this out. Obviously for a, this is a dev build, so this is what you probably want to set for your dev settings. And we can say no replied examples, all fine. Enable this is all false, because that'll be, you can't do that with Papercut. But then of course you'd override these if you were pushing up into your production systems, into your test environments, and finally into production. And so we can try run this, and let's see if we got this right. Okay, so there's our email. Try it out, execute. Not happy about something. Failure setting the email. The SMTP host was not specified. Oh, that's because I forgot what it's called. Host. Rename. Host. Yeah, that's the kind of fun and games that you have to deal with ChatGPT. I've noticed. Let's execute that. We get a 201, which means inside of here, there we go. There's our test email for the webinar. So we could probably hit this a few times. Bam, bam, bam. And there's all our test emails. Okay, so we know that this works, and this is actually an SMTP system, and we can actually use this now. So that module would be pretty much ready to go if you were happy with it. And you know, it's if you don't have high volumes of emails and you just want to do some basic things, there you go. That's a very basic email system. Okay, so that's the second phase. Now we've still got a bit of time. So what I'd like to cover next is I'd like to look at a slightly more advanced example. So what we're going to do as part of this more advanced example is when we take a look at a domain, oftentimes a very common use case, and there is a module that we've built for this that is available, you want to do basic auditing. So you want to have things like a created by string and a created date, which is a date time, and so on and so forth. And you want to have all of these added in here. And then you want to link them up with some kind of infrastructure like entity framework, and you want to actually populate them whenever this gets saved. Okay, so that's what we want to use as this example. So I'm going to take you through the steps that we can do as part of this. This is a great example we like to use from time to time. So we're going to go ahead and create another module. We'll call this one webinar.modules.entities.basic auditing. And we're going to need C#, of course, and the domain, because we're going to be extending out our actual domain entities. And let's just close all but this. All right. Well, in fact, we close that too. And let's get right into it. So the first thing that we need to do is we could ask ChatGPT to go ahead and create this for us. So, you know, if you guys are not familiar with a EF core pattern, like here, I can just show you what a basic auditing pattern looks like. Yeah, so I think I might have been asking ChatGPT 3 there, but this is good enough. Okay, so this is what we want. We essentially want an I-audited interface like this. So that's very straightforward with the created by, created date, date time. Of course, you'd want these two to be nullable. It's just forgot about that, but you know, c'est la vie. All right, so let's get into it. We want let's just call it audited interface. And this is a single file. We're going to want to also extend each entity with that, so we can use an extension for that. So we'll call it the entities entities audit extension. I think that's good enough. And we can go ahead and run the software factory for this, shut down that other one in the meantime, and apply those changes, hop back into our module building. And we should have our basic entities. One is not applicable, but there's our entities auditing. Okay, so this is going to be so straightforward. You guys probably already know how to do something like this based on what you've seen. We're going to want to just go and add a set of properties. So the first one is a string, and we're going to call this created by. And we're going to need 4 properties, and this is going to be an updated by. And then we're going to need the 2 dates. So updated date. This will be created date. And these will both be date times. And of course, if we're going to use a date time, we just need to add a using for system. And it's using global usings. And this you'll probably need just in case someone's not using global usings. And if we're happy with all of that, we just need to say that these are nullable, right? We can build that, all right? And we can hop over to our clean architecture. And now one of the things that I want to just show you is before we install this, we can decide, I mentioned earlier that we'll talk a little bit about the role system, is we can decide where we want to put this. Now, this needs to obviously go into the domain. So I can take a look here. The first thing I can see is if we go to the domain, I can see that there are a couple of roles here. Now, the role that seems most applicable is the domain role. So I'm going to use the role called domain. So let's just hop back into the module builder over here. And I can change this role. I can just call it domain. All right. The second thing is that that'll put it into this project, but now we want to put it maybe into the common interfaces folder. So to do that, I'm going to put here common for the default location / interfaces. And if we say save now, we can rerun the software factory. It's just going to wire up that configuration for us, so we don't have to really worry about this going forward. And when we come into our modules, we can browse for the webinar. And there we go. And we can go and install basic auditing. All right, now what you can notice now is that it's going ahead and running the software factory, and you can see right out the gates, it's installed iAudited into the correct location, common interfaces in the domain. And if we hop back over to our Visual Studio, let's just bring that up. You can see that it's gone and put that right in there, exactly where we told it to. So that's how we can make sure. So if we came back to our email system, we probably want to choose infrastructure and put it into a default email folder as an example. And for the test application, for the application layer, we'd probably want to put it into maybe common interfaces or something like that. So, we can get to decide where these things should go by default by using the role system. So if you think about, or if you just want to understand some of how it works under the hood here, it's really just using this. It identifies this string. There is a little bit of a cascade system. So so if I choose repository and not repository interface, it'll still find this. So there's a cascade system with the dots. Won't get too deep into that, but there is documentation on that if you're interested. But otherwise, we can just identify domain, and that'll set us into the root. And then from there, and domain obviously could exist inside a folder too. And then from there, it uses a set of subfolders based on the default location that we specify over here. So that's really what's going on over there. Okay, so we've got our iAudited interface. We can go ahead and apply that. And let's say we want to go and apply this to our entities. We can just go into that factory extension. And now what we're going to do is, well, I'm just going to do it in the same location. So let's just go to override. I want to do this after template registration. There we go. And I'm going to get my templates out, which will be application find. I'm going to look for all templates, which implement C# builder. And now we're going to say we're going to use a template dependency. So it's expecting a template dependency. There is a cool overload where we can just pass in the string coming in, I think, one of the next versions. So we can just say on template, and now we can pass in the string, which is this. Now we need to go and find out what our entity's ID is. So we could use the role, but I'm not going to use the role. I'm just going to keep this very simple and just use the ID itself. And we can hop back in here and we can say find all the entities. And then for each of them, let's go ahead and say, and this is exactly what we did earlier, C# file on build. And I can say file dot classes dot first. And let's just actually set this to be our first class. So I think we may want to use this over again. I'm not sure. And we can say implements the following interface, this or template dot interface, audited interface. All right, so if we add that over there and we say build, software factory is already on the go again. And we can see now all of our different entities are actually getting this iAudited interface. All right, and it's obviously resolving the using clause because we used the type name system to resolve that. So we've already got an extended and existing pattern. So this pattern is built by our team, okay? And we've gotten extended a little bit over here and basically said, well, this is actually going to add this interface to all classes. Now, we may not want this to be applied to all classes. All right, we may want to apply this only to specific classes. So let's go ahead and just enable that. So the way that we can do that is we would want to, if we look at the domain, we would probably want to pick that the order and the product are the ones that are going to have the auditing interface. This order line won't, okay? So in order to achieve that, we can go ahead and say, because the order line, I'm sure this clear, is just because it's a composite. So we're not really interested. It's not the aggregate root. We just want to apply this to the aggregate roots. So we can use a stereotype to do that. So stereotypes are things that you can apply to elements and associations to capture additional metadata. So we just want to really the additional metadata we want to capture here is that we've essentially flagged this. So we're going to flag it with something called audited. And I'm just going to hop into the internet here to look for an audited icon. And we can use this one here. This is the one that I've played with before. So copy that. And we can just go and set, well, the target types will target a class. So it needs us to target that. And then we can go ahead and just paste this icon over here. So that's the icon we want to use for it. And I can also say that this must display the icon true. All right. We can run that now. The one thing that you'll notice is that the software factory, when it executes, it is giving us a warning, and this warning is important. It's telling us, look, you've got a stereotype here, but you haven't included this package. So we need to just tell intentarchitect, like, look, you need to include this module, include this package in the module, because it doesn't do that by default. And you wanted to just reference it in the domain designer by default as well. So we're just going to tell it to do that. That's one of those little, it can catch you. So just keep that in mind when you're doing stereotypes and you want to add metadata. You must always remember to check that box and say which designer you want this to come in by default. And so it's just going to wire that up for us. And when we come back into our domain now, it's going to reload. And if we want, we can say here, I should be able to apply. If I say apply stereotype, I should see my audited stereotype over there. Okay, so if you take a look at the software factory, nothing's really changing over here. We need to firstly now respect this. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say here, let's just get the model for this template. So template as well, let me just put in brackets, template dot or as I template with model. All right. And we're going to check the model over here. I'm being cautious because you never know if this model exists, and I'm going to say as class model. Okay, so that's what the domain entities are based off of. The reason I know it's called class model is just for interest's sake is because this is called a class, and the naming convention is whenever you look at something, attribute, class, operation, or class constructor or operation, it'll always have a model suffixed after it, because intentarchitect actually automates the generation of these models when you do designer building, which is something we're not covering as part of this introduction, but it is also a part of the ecosystem, and we will be doing a webinar on that later. All right, so we've got our model over here. So let's just say if the model has, and you'll see that this is has audited. Now this got generated for us. It's just checking whether this stereotype got created. So when we create that stereotype, it understands enough for us to create this. If this is false, then I'm going to go ahead and say, oh, actually, no, if this is true, because we could end up with a null problem there. I'm just going to put this all in here. All right, we keep it simple. So if it's audited true, we can build. Software factory is going to run. And we're going to see that we're going to get some changes now because it's going to go ahead and remove our I audited. Okay, so we can apply that. We can come back to our domain and we can select these two. Just ended up creating them again. No, stop that. So I'm just dragging down with control, and then it creates them. Audited, and now we can see both of these are audited. We can say save. Software factory is going to run. It's going to check that logic and it's going to say, well, okay, you've selected these two, so I will then apply them over there. Now, if we apply these, I want you to notice that it's not happy. It wants to create a whole bunch of create by fields on this. Okay, shut this down. We don't need to run it. So we need to decide. There's a few things we could do. The first is we could go here and we could do this. We could say, we could do this as an example. All right, and it's going to go ahead and essentially add those fields to any order or product that has been has got this audited on it, and that would be fine. But the thing is that there's a few limitations. The first is that we can't see those fields here, and so those won't necessarily be available to us if we want to. We can't see them visibly. And the second thing is that we can't see them if we want to have, for example, a service. So if we had a service over here, let's just use the accelerator system. So we can go ahead and create maybe a service for our products, and we wanted to project out from the product. You'll see I can't send back who created it and who updated it. So those things are missing because they're just not in the metadata. So there's a bit of a limitation over there. And I may want to, so let me just, let's go and actually expose these as well. Just run this so that we've got these. So if we want to actually, go ahead and get our, now it's going and put these in here. If we want to do it this way, there are limitations to doing it this way. But what I'd rather suggest that we look at to make this a bit more of an advanced use case is we look at actually automating the creation of the created by, which is a string, and the created date. And we go ahead and do that because we don't want to have to do that ourselves each and every single time. So the way that we can go ahead and do that is we need to build something called a designer extension. Okay, so hopping back into our module, we can go here and we can create a new, when you create a designers folder, this is a special folder which gives us a whole bunch of extra options where we can create designers and designer extensions. As I mentioned, we're not going to get too deep into this world, but we're going to start using it. So I'll create something here called a domain auditing extension. Okay, these names are useful for us to re-identify what has been installed later on. And we're going to tell this will target the domain by default. And I'm going to go ahead and create an element extension called my class extension because we want to extend the class. And I'm going to go and also tell it that I want to add event settings, and we're going to just use the on changed event. So this is an event this is a script that'll essentially get run every single time the class gets changed inside of the designer. So every single time we add a new field or we add a stereotype or anything like that, this script will run. So obviously the script's empty, so it's telling us, well, you need to go and actually add a script over here. And what we're going to want to do here is we're going to say, well, if this element, and this is now JavaScript, right? So we're going to build a script that we can run, a custom script that we can run inside of the actual designer. We're going to create if the element has a stereotype called audited, we can do the following. First thing we'll want to do is we'll want to say, well, if we only want to create it if it doesn't exist. So we don't want to, every single time there's a change, we go create a new field. So we're going to say, well, if any of the children, or at least if every child on this element, so the children in this case will be the operations and the attributes. So if we want it to be like a little bit more robust, we'd probably say just the attribute. Okay. If every one of those names is not equal to created by, then let's just go here and say let attribute. I mean, this is you'll see that there's IntelliSense here that we can use. So create element. And we can create an attribute which will be called created by on this elements itself.id. All right. And we can go ahead and just do that for all 4 of them. Just want to get my indentation right out the gates. So this will be a created date. And this will be an updated by. And this will be an updated date. All right. Okay, so we can go ahead and then we can also say here else, well, if it's not there, we want to probably have a way to re-identify these. So I'm going to look for an attribute. I'm going to add some metadata here, and I'm going to call this metadata. This is just really a key value pair in the background that we can apply certain information so that we know that it exists. And we can say that this is an auditing field. And I'll just put there true. And we'll just apply this to all of these over here so that we could just say on the element children, and I'll once again do the correct thing and just say only attributes, because we don't want to inspect things like operational constructors would also be considered children to this element. The elements, by the way, are the building blocks. So there's a few building blocks in Intentarchitect: elements, associations, packages. That's really the building blocks of everything you see in Intentarchitect: classes, attributes. Those are all just elements. The associations are associations, inheritance, generalizations, also an association. So everything is built up of these building blocks, and this API gives us access to some of those low-level components like the elements. And we can say here we're going to filter for where it has this metadata. So we're looking for metadata that's auditing field. Hope I didn't misspell that. And for each of these, I'm going to delete them. All right. And we can say done over there, save, run the software factory execution. It's going to go wire this up. You can go see that this is the actual extension over here. There's the macro, so on changed for type of class, if you want to see how things look under the hood. And that obviously gets interpreted. So if I apply that now and we head over to our domain, you'll see it's going to reload. It's obviously picked up that there's a new settings that's come in. We can reload that. And now if we come here and we say, well, let's just add this again, because of course it's only on change that it'll get kicked in. So add audited, bam, okay. It's going to go and add all of these different fields. So that's really cool because we could do, this is just an example of us adding these fields by default, but you can imagine that we can pretty much do anything here. So we can tell it, to do whatever whenever this changes, I can trigger some kind of instructions and code to do things. So if we delete it now, it should actually delete all of them. So yep, there we go. And of course, this all will work with the undo redo systems. So you can just go and undo and redo those. And same for this one over here. Let's just go ahead and do that. And if we wanted to create, for example, a new, customer, we can go ahead and just apply auditing over there and it'll go and add those for us. Now, maybe we want to, and you can see that there's some other things that we can do. You saw that there was this auto manage keys, add triggers, these kinds of things. Another quick example that we can take a look at from a scripting perspective is we could decide, well, another way we could extend this is instead of on change, we could run a script that comes as part of the menu. So I could say here, add auditing or basic auditing. Okay, and this script, because we've got the other one, we could just we could make this a little bit faster for the users. We could say we're going to, if this element has stereotype audited. And when I say has the stereotype, I mean does not have the stereotype. I'm going to go here and I'm going to say add stereotype audited. Now, this is doing it as a string. If you want a little bit more robustness, we could just go here, grab this ID, okay? And we can come back in over here and I can just use the ID itself. Now, that means that if I ever change it from the name audited, rename this to something else, then the script will keep working. So that's just worth keeping in mind, is that using the surrogate keys is, and we typically do things like this. We would put a constant over here, audited ID, and we would do it something like this, just so that it's a little bit more readable. Otherwise, you end up with these GUIDs all over the place. All right. One thing I could just mention on this as well is that we're doing all of these in this design over here. When we do more complicated scripting, you know, like those RDMS scripts and things like that you guys saw in action earlier. So those that uses the system where all of those IDs and PKs and stuff just came in automatically. We do that in TypeScript, and we generate out the JavaScript and then paste the JavaScript directly in here. And we've got a very cool roadmap for the future of the scripting systems, so that we can reuse different components and things like that through TypeScript. So very, very cool stuff coming in the future. Let's just go run this software factory and apply those to the designer, and we can head back over here. And what we should see is that our orders and so on and so forth are actually now they're getting their fields correctly. And what you'll notice is that because we are doing these as part of the metadata now, it's actually picking up some other things that the template would want to do as part of that. It's also registering all of these things up with our EF, okay? So all of those things that you would expect to do are happening now automatically. I see it's also just bringing in our customer repository, because of course we created the customer. And so all of these things are now in place. So we can head back to our domain. And we can see here that if we right click this, we can say add basic auditing. Now it's got this funky icon over there. Let's just go change that. And I'm going to make that the same icon as this. So just open up this icon, copy it, and head over to the script, head over to the icon and paste it. It's just a base64 encoded URL there. And we can just go ahead and apply that. And Software Factory is running now. So I don't think anything's going to change. Yep, no changes there, but we can head back to the domain and we should be able to say, there we go. So now we've got a nice icon, add basic auditing. And if we want, we could even add a shortcut for this. So if we add it now, of course, it's idempotent because we checked, it won't add it multiple times. So if the user wants to remove it now, they can remove it in that way. And of course, what we could do is we could put certain conditional logic and things like that if we wanted to be able to remove the basic auditing. So that's just some other ways that you can do things. So you see, we've also got our own ones here. So manage keys, you know, things like on the services where we go, these CRUD scripts, that's just an extension on this package, exactly as we've done with the menu option with a script that we run. So whenever I say create CRUD operations for a customer, and it goes and creates all of these things, that is just a script that you guys just saw there. The API is, as you saw earlier, the API is, you do get IntelliSense on how to use it. So there is some stuff there, but a lot of the ins and outs of it, there is an API that if you guys are interested, we're happy to show you guys where that is, that you can follow if you want to understand what different options are available to you if you're doing scripting. So guys, that's really the three different phases. This is the slightly more advanced example. The one thing that, of course, we're missing over here, which we could do as well, is to get this to work with the EF, is we could put an entity framework auditing or audit extension. It's called auditing extension. And, you know, just allow that to get built. And we can just hop over here and we can just go, we could build all of the, we could go set all of that up. Where is it now? Matrix extensions, oh, there it is. Framework auditing. So once again, I'm also just going to do this after registration. So override after template registration. And I've just got I was actually just see, I think I had one a little bit earlier. I'll just go steal that just so that we don't have to waste time actually implementing this. I'll just go find it on this other monitor. And we can just get this plugged in very, very easily for ourselves. Okay, so there is a quick example that I set up just so I can show you guys how we would do this. So this is an implementation that we can use. So we can see here what it's doing is we're going and fetching out the DB context. Okay, so this DB context name, as you guys would expect, is if we head over to the DB context, we're going to find this identifier. And what we're going to do is we're going to add in a using clause. We're going to just go through the class. We're going to say here, well, okay, I want to inject the current user service. Okay, so typically what you do over here is you'd actually locate the current user service using the get type name system. So that we're not doing over here, just keeping it simple. But that's how you'd want to do this if you want to do it really properly. And we're adding a method over here called apply audit. And then what we're doing is below that, we're actually finding the save changes, finding the statement called with return that starts with return, because we can see here that there is a return statement that's part of this. So we're finding the first one over there, and we're just inserting the apply audit info above that. So of course you could go and you could stipulate this find statement a lot more robustly. We oftentimes even use like certain metadata to re-identify things in the background. So even if it does change over time, the other modules don't break. But this is pretty, if you know what you're looking for, you'll be fine for the most part with this module. If we were to build this now, allow the software factory to execute, just to give you guys a last little bit of how this all can fit together. As we can see, it's going to inject in our current user. So that's part of the security. Applies the audit info, creates this method over here. And here you can see we're just going to go and fetch out the current user. Otherwise, we're going to put it as unknown, and we're going to set all of these things. And we can apply those changes. And what we should be able to do is, if this is all set up correctly, we can run this system. Not happy about something. Yes, okay. We probably forgot to remove these. So we've got duplicate properties. Let's just build that. No, wrong place. Those duplicate properties. All right. Yeah, so it's just removing the duplicates that were created over there. And there we go. Everything should be fine now. The date, shit. One thing that we didn't do here is, let me just go fix this up. This is going to just take us another minute. So one thing I forgot to do is I forgot to set these to dates. Okay, so let's just start shutting. Got a couple of things open over here. All right, so this script, the one thing that we missed is we need to set the date time to a date as well as the updated date. I forgot to do that. So there's a way to get the date ID. You can go find it. Another way to just do it is, because we're not really worried about performance, because this happens only every single time you apply audited. We can just go find the date time ID by just looking up types of type definitions. Okay, so that's the type that the date time is, and we can then say filter for where it's name. So it's a bit of an interesting approach, but this is fine for now, just so you guys can see where I'm getting that from. And we can just go and look for the ID over here. All right, so I can then come over here and I can say, all right, the attribute dot type reference, set type. So we're just going to set the type reference to this ID and say for this one over here. But these two, we also forgot, the other thing that we forgot here is we forgot to set their nullable to true. So I'm just going to go do that for both of those as well. Done, save, run. Okay, and let's just head over to our domain. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of these. There we go. Yep. There we go. Date time, that's correct. Just delete these guys too. Date time and those ones. So now that we know that's working, obviously we could run this as on load. We could rerun the script to fix things, but that's just a little bit of extra noise, especially if we know that right now we're just going through a testing phase, that once these things are set up correctly, that should be that. There shouldn't be anything else to really worry about. But now that this is all set up correctly, it's going to fix up, I think, our EF. So yeah, taking out the requirements on those and so on and so forth. And if we come back here, everything now should be able to run. Okay, so the interesting side of this is if we had to create a product, let's go ahead and create one. I think that it's not happy with something over here. Maybe we've forgotten. Let's just take a quick look. Seems to be unhappy with something that we've put on this. Well, I'm just going to ignore that for now. because I think we're using a constructor there. So let's just go ahead and expose these ones and just work with them, because I know that those we aren't. That's a very straightforward class. And all that we want to see is that the auditing is working. So I'm not going to get into why that thing is giving us a 400. I'm sure we've just missed something. And let's get back to running this. Okay, let's see. Let's hope that that's all fine now. Yeah, so we got a 201 over here. If we had to just fetch that out, okay, the one thing that we've got here is just the ID. Okay, we want to also fetch out. Let's just extend this. So now we get this advantage that we can actually pass back all of these fields. So let's just go ahead and do that. And we can rerun the software factory execution. Creates our user. And now when we return it, we should see that, yes, unknown. So of course we don't have security running right now. We'd have to enable security and then get some kind of an SDS in the mix so that we can get a token. But if we update this, so if we fetch this ID over here, we should be able to, let's just find the update. So we're going to execute that. If we do a search again, there's of course nothing got updated. Yeah, sorry guys, show some bad examples over here. Should have actually added something to this customer so that we could actually work with it. So give it a name. Just give it a quick name over there. Save. Go back to the services. Let's just go fix up our update of our customer. So we want to include the name so that we can actually set something. Apply all of that. Come back in, rerun. And let's just go through these steps again. So try out creating the customer. Needs the name now. The joys. Set the name. Here we go. And let's see if we can't get this right. We've still got a few minutes left, so I think, for me to show you the little surprise as well. Just want to see that we can see this working. So name is just string. Now we get the 201 if we had to fetch it out. Of course, we're not fetching out the name, but that's okay, because we're just looking to see that the auditing fields are coming in correctly. So the created by is fine. Let's just check that our update, just grab this ID over here, that our update is working properly. So try it out, set that ID, make sure that that ID is the same, execute, get a 204, and we should be able to search now. And holding thumbs? No. All right. So for some reason, it's not picking up that our update's happening. I'm not 100% sure why. Maybe it just needs to change. So it's maybe just that. Let's just try that again. Execute. There we go. Okay. So it was just being smart. I just needed to make sure that I changed the name to something else. And so there's our second update. So it's linking in with the infrastructure. We're getting some basic auditing. If we can put some security in, and we can actually have a token that'll back this, or some way to provide a user to the current user service, we'll populate this with actual created by and updated by. So guys, that's really the 3 stages. The one last thing I wanted to touch on in the last few minutes is there's some very cool stuff that we have been looking at in the AI space. One of the things that we've asked, we've been looking at training with intentarchitect is it possible to get intentarchitect, or to get ChatGPT to actually automate the creation of file builder templates themselves, because it is very correlated. All right, it's actually a very straightforward process. So this may be a little bit out of date. Let's just see if it'll work. But let's go back to our example of, for example, let's just get it to create us a generic service for Azure Blob Storage. May or may not work, because it looks like this may have timed out. I kind of warmed this training earlier, but we can kick it off again. It usually takes about 3 minutes or so to get ChatGPT to just get through everything. So since we're at the end of the presentation, I'm sure you guys don't mind just waiting to see what it can do. All right, so it's just going to go and set up. So right now what it's doing is it's just setting up a very basic pattern for Azure Blob Storage. Okay, we've got a module for this. We've got a module for the for basic auditing and so on and so forth. So these kinds of things are already done, but you can see that this is just setting things up for us, and of course putting in a pattern that makes some sense. All right, let's see if we can now convert these to file builder templates. Let's just see if it can do this. All right, so this is where it gets interesting. Is here we can see that it's going ahead and actually writing out. So while this is going, let's go spin up a quick thing and see how close it gets. So webinar.modules .azure blob storage. Okay. There we go. C# create. We know we're going to need a service. All right, so we're going to need a service called, what was it called? So it's this one here. So of course I'm going to take out the I because it doesn't work so well. And this is a single file. And the other one that we need is just the Azure Blob Storage service over here. All right, single file too. Let's run the software factory for this. Shut down these other ones along. And we can hop in over here. And we've got our fourth module, which is for Azure Blob Storage. There it is. There's our two templates. So let's go to the interface and let's see how accurate this actually was. All right, so we want to grab pretty much all of that. And we can paste all of that over there. Seems happy. Okay. And we want to grab all of this. And we want to put that into our, I think we just want to put that over here. All right. I think I must have just missed or deleted a curly brace. There we go. All right. So it actually seems pretty happy with all of that. I'm very curious as to what this is going to do. So let's try it out. Well, the first thing I can just say is that we're probably going to want to at least tell it that it implements that interface. Implements that interface, this blob storage interface. What else do we need to just tell this? Class, there's a constructor. Using clauses all seem to be there. I hope that this is going to work. So we're just going to build that and we can head over to our testing grounds. And we can install Azure Blob Storage. Now, of course, once again, it doesn't know where to put these because we didn't tell it. So let's just go drag these in ourselves. So let's just see, we want to put this into, probably into common interfaces again. And we're going to want to put this into, I'm just going to chuck it into an Azure folder over here. Probably want to say, I would almost certainly put this into a separate project. And let's see what it does. So there's our Azure Blob Storage using that, got the interface correct, so on and so forth. The only thing that I think we just wanted to see here is this connection string. Obviously, we would need to wire this up with dependency injection. So I think that you guys can see here, we don't have to type all of these things out. We can actually just delegate this over to ChatGPT. Now, I'm sure a lot of you guys are very interested how we've trained ChatGPT with this. So we've got quite a simple script. If you guys want to, this is very, very new for us too. This is not something that, there's a module that you can install and run that'll just do all of this stuff perfectly. We're seeing a lot of very inconsistent results out of ChatGPT. I think we're very lucky because as part of the webinar today, we've got a nice example where actually everything works and it followed the API pretty much to the T. But if you guys are interested in collaborating with us on this, we would love that. So, feel free to reach out to the team through any of the channels, through our direct channels that you guys all have, as well as through our Git support page and so on and so forth. So if you guys want to collaborate with us on this and start using it and helping us get better training systems, that'll be great. So feel free to reach out. And guys, I want to just thank you for joining us for this webinar today. It's been an absolute pleasure presenting all of this, and I hope you guys enjoyed and found the session useful and educational. I hope that we see you on the next one. So thanks again, guys, and please give us some feedback. I'm going to be just sharing a QR code that you guys can use to just give us feedback. So that's all from me, and till next one. Cheers.